Petrarch's reference to divine retribution is really telling there because it raises the question, where did people believe that Black Death came from? French astrologer Geoffroy de Meaux wrote a treatise on the cause of the plague in which he blamed astrological phenomena that took place in 1345 before the outbreak. He said, "Wherefore it has been, and is, known by all astrologers, that in the year 1345 there was a total eclipse of the moon of long duration on 18th March. At the longitude of Oxford, it began an hour after the moon rose, and at the time the two planets were in conjunction in Aquarius, and Mars was with them in the same sign within the light of Jupiter." French physician John Jacobus, as recorded by Swedish cleric Bent Knudsen, argued that the disease was caused by corrupted air. When environmental factors align, a hot sun, for instance, accompanied by a strong wind from a certain direction, foul air could spread disease. He said, "Sometimes it comes of dead carrion, or the corruption of standing waters and ditches or sloughs, or other corrupt places, and these things are sometimes universal and sometimes particular."
I just want to jump in here because I think this is interesting because we know now that the quote-unquote the corruption of standing water actually can spread disease, but how does standing water spread disease, April?
By drinking it.
Well, yeah, but you're probably not going to, well, yes. Typically, you're not going to be drinking out of an old stagnant puddle, but what do puddles foster?
Mosquitoes.
Mosquitoes, right, which will spread disease.
This was a lesson, and I didn't like it.
So you'll see little glimmers of real things, like real science in some of these sources. They're just obviously interpreting through their 1300s brains.
Jacobus calls this insipid, inspissated air, or air that was thick. When that thick air gathered over a person, it corrupted the spirits of man, causing, among other things, swellings. Jacobus also tried to explain why some people were infected while others weren't by linking this bad air to the humoral theory. As a quick reminder, the humoral theory was the idea that the body contained four humors that had to be kept in balance: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. According to Jacobus, people who ran hot and dry in their humoral balance tended to have large, open pores, which allowed more miasma in.
Yep, so we see sort of a coming together of these different medical theories. Others agreed that it was miasma, but believed that the miasma didn't just come from something normal, like rotting carcasses. It actually came from the center of the earth. One anonymous German writer wrote that the plague was caused by, quote, a corrupt and poisonous earthly exhalation. He believed that the earth was full of fumes, which he actually says batter against the sides of the earth, trying to get out. When air gets trapped in the earth, it, quote, becomes so corrupted that it constitutes a potent poison to men. Earthquakes released these terrible vapors, causing disease. To explain why the rich became sick less frequently than the poor, which is not probably actually very accurate, because I think that rich and poor died sort of at the same, more or less the same rates. He said that rich people ate good hot food and lots of wine, which filled them with fumes, leaving no room for poisonous earth fumes.
Toot fumes.
Correct. That's how I interpret it. Yeah. Poor people, without access to such fume-producing foods, had plenty of fume space inside them, and therefore got more easily infected. So, while this guy's theory is bonkers, it demonstrates that the prevailing theory of infection was the miasma theory, an idea that would last well into the 19th century. And you see this even in the guy who's talking about astrology. It's because this, the phases of the moon or whatever, the Aquarius thing, affected miasmas that were created, right? There was this linkage between the movement of the planets and miasmas. Like, miasma is really the dominant theory.
An anonymous poem written sometime in the 14th century decried sin as the ultimate cause of the pestilence. See how England mourns, drenched in tears. The people, stained by sin, quake with grief. Plague is killing men and beasts. Why? because vices rule unchallenged here. Alas, the whole world is now given over to spite. Where can a kind heart be found among the people? No one thinks of the crucified Christ, and therefore the people perish as a token of vengeance. Romantic. Heinrich von Herford, a friar from Westphalia, which is in Germany, blamed the clergy for indulging their own vices instead of doing their best to be humble and godly pastors. He said, "Look at all these abbots, priors, wardens, masters, lectors, provosts, and canons, and groan. Look at their life, the example they give, their career and their doctrine, and at the risks to their people, and tremble. And you too, Lord, Father of mercies, look down and have mercy, for we have sinned against you." One sin in particular, pride, seemed to concern clerics the most. An anonymous English monk believed that increasingly intricate and lavish clothing was to blame. He said, "Women flowed with the tides of fashion in this and other things even more eagerly, wearing clothes that were so tight that they wore a foxtail hanging down inside their skirts at the back to hide their asses." He goes on to say, "This sin of pride manifested in this way must surely bring down misfortune in the future." Another writer was angry about gowns, particularly men's gowns, which is a tunic over hose.
Right.
"This garment has an apt name, being called gown in the vernacular, and well called, since it is said that gown derives from gown, which ought properly be pronounced wown, that is to say, wide open to mockery. They have party-colored and striped hose, which they tie with laces to their padlocks, and which are called harlots, and thus one harlot serves another, because the people wantonly squander the gifts of God on rage, pride, lechery, and greed, and all the rest of the deadly sins. It is only to be expected that the Lord's vengeance will follow."
Some medieval Christians didn't believe that regular old mass attendance and prayer were sufficient to meet the threat, even if they increased the numbers, right? Having required, multiple mass attendances a week, that just wasn't, sufficient. Something had to be done to truly atone. Religious fraternities of lay people were common in medieval Europe, focusing on different kinds of religious service. Some functioned like public charities, offering support to the poor and, during the plague, even helping to bury the dead. Others, though, focused on performing a kind of collective penance for the world's sins. These men, who called themselves the Disciplinati, used whips, often with 3 thongs with bent nails at the tips, to punish themselves and each other as a form of atonement. They were also sometimes called flagellants, named for the Latin word for whip, flagellum. These groups were not aligned or connected to the Catholic Church. Although they were certainly Catholic, this wasn't a sanctioned practice. When the Black Death arrived, these flagellant societies morphed into something larger. It seemed obvious to deeply religious society that if the plague was caused by sin, it required serious atonement to appease God. And so many people joined, or at least supported, these flagellant groups. Despite the hostile relationship between the church and the flagellants, the need seemed so great that Pope Clement VI participated in a flagellant gathering in France in 1348. Soon, bands of flagellants were wandering around Europe, traveling from town to town, performing this act of penance. Groups as large as 200 might walk into a town, strip themselves to the waist, sing, and whip themselves in a central gathering space. Heinrich von Hereford, the German friar, remarked that flagellants straggled along behind the cross, forming into a procession when they entered a town, with hoods or hats pulled down over their foreheads and sad and downcast eyes, which when they went through the streets singing a sweet hymn,
But whenever they came to the part of the hymn which mentioned the passion of Christ, they all suddenly threw themselves down prostrate on the ground, regardless of where they were, whether there were thorns or thistles or nettles or stones. Hereford, a real clergyman, was not a fan of the flagellants. He called them ignorant, stupid, annoying, and suggested that they were heretical, which the upper echelons of the church eventually agreed on. By October 1349, Pope Clement issued a papal bull condemning the flagellants and insisted that local parishes refuse to entertain the itinerant bands.
Not unrelated to the belief that the plague was a result of rampant sin, many Catholic Europeans believed that a perceived enemy of Christianity might be to blame: the Jews. While the position of the Catholic Church was officially to support and protect European Jews, many Catholics felt that Jews were a kind of enemy as the, quote, killers of Christ. Witches, but still. It didn't seem like a stretch for these Catholics that Jews, who they didn't want in their society anyway, might be the culprits for the plague outbreak. Hermann Gigas, another German friar, discusses the causes of the plague this way, quote, "Some say it was brought about by corruption of the air. Others that the Jews planned to wipe out all the Christians with poison and had poisoned wells and springs everywhere. And many Jews confessed as much under torture, that they bred spiders and toads in pots and pans and had obtained poison from overseas, and that not every Jew knew about the wickedness, only the more powerful ones, so that it would not be betrayed." In 1349, a physician in France wrote that while the first waves of the plague were natural, the third wave, which he's describing one hitting France in 1349, was, quote, human artifice, and suggested that men were filling glass jars with gaseous poison. So again, getting back to this miasma theory, even though it's also crazy, scapegoating. So these glass jars with gaseous poison and smashing them on rocks to spread pestilence. As a result of such stories, communities began to punish Jewish populations for their crimes, quote-unquote crimes, even before guys like Gigas and this French physician were blaming them. In 1348, about 40 Jewish people were murdered while they slept in their beds in Toulon, France. There are many other examples of this comparatively small-scale murder, although it seems awful to refer to the murders of 40 people as small scale. Unfortunately, there was much worse to come. In Basel, Switzerland, in 1349, 200 Jews were locked in a barn and burned alive. In Strasbourg, in the Alsace-Lorraine region on the border of France and Germany, 900 Jews were burned alive and another 900 expelled from the city, effectively removing all Jews from the region. I often use The Walking Dead as an example in class, because students at least have some familiarity with the show, and they're like, oh, okay, I sort of see how it's not, the plot of the show isn't about the disease, it's about the people and how the people react to it. It's an interesting way of getting students to think about the social and cultural impacts of disease.
Yeah. So the economy was thrown into flex because the vast death toll meant a shortage of agricultural labor, which incongruously led to higher wages and better conditions for peasants, but landlords suffered. In Italy, according to historian Joseph Burns, some landlords were eventually so impoverished they became outlaws and mercenaries. In England, this eventually led to the restructuring of English society. New wage laws tried to stop peasants from using labor shortages to their advantage and aligned the crown with middling landowners, helping to create a new gentry class and kill the old feudal system. It also ushered in changes that we might recognize as public health laws. The most famous example is the Italian city of Pistoia, which put in place a strict code that has become known as the Plague Ordinances. These ordinances controlled the trade of certain items, including wool cloth, which was suspected of harboring disease, controlled movement in and out of the city, and banned trades associated with foul odors, including tanning leather inside the city walls. It also dictated lots of new rules on funerals and burial. Dead bodies could not be brought into the city for any reason. Non-family members were not allowed to enter the homes of the dead, and bodies had to be buried in wooden boxes at least 2.5 arms length deep to avoid stench. Is that 6 feet?
I'm not sure. I wonder if it is, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I bet it's 6 feet.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, or 5, right? If you think that your arm might be, what, 2 feet?
2.5, maybe?
And then 2.5 would be 5, yeah. What's really interesting in this section of the plague ordinances of Pistoia is that they also tried to control mourning. Funeral gifts, which were a common European custom, were banned, as was any public mourning for anyone who died outside of Pistoia. No one was allowed to buy or wear new mourning clothes, and the bells could not be rung during funerals, as they typically were. Avril, why do you think the governing council of Pistoia enacted these really sort of specific ordinances around the act of mourning?
You don't want people to go to the funeral.
Okay, why not?
Because then there'd be close contact with the dead body, which might harbor the disease.
It might smell.
And it might be smelly.
Right, so like there's the miasma thing.
Probably was
but
smelling.
Like,
they didn't have any
formaldehyde. Exactly, right. I mean, the dead bodies are going to smell. That's why are they burying them 2.5 arms lengths deep? To avoid stench, right?
Yeah, cover it with dirt.
Absolutely.
Maybe newspaper.
But there are also no funeral gifts, no public mourning for anyone who died outside of Pistoia. No one's allowed to buy new mourning clothes.
That one seems strange.
It is strange, but what I think it really gets to is not so much that they don't want people to go to funerals, which there are some restrictions on, like, how many people can go, like, for instance, back to the house after the funeral. So they are trying to limit attendance at funerals. But what this is really about is if they were ringing the bells like they do traditionally during a funeral, how much do you think those bells would be ringing?
All day,
constantly,
all night.
Constantly, constant bell ringing.
Yeah.
If you had to go out, as custom would dictate normally, and buy new mourning clothes, if your husband died, if your father died, if your uncle died, right, you would be broke.
So they pass these ordinances in the middle of the plague, not after.
Correct.
Oh,
right.
okay.
It's while it's still affecting
so
the
it's
city.
to alleviate the infrastructure in the people of the city.
Sort of, yeah. It's basically trying to say, like, funerals are getting out of control because it's happening so often. We can't keep up with the funeral gifts. We can't keep up with the mourning clothes. We can't have the bells ringing constantly because it is destroying morale.
Yeah.
If you have bells ringing constantly to indicate funerals, then that is just driving home to everyone that everyone is dying.
Everybody's dead.
Everybody's dead.
Bring out your dead.
Yeah, exactly. Bring out your dead. So I think that that's one of the most telling parts of the plague ordinances, because it's getting at this attempt to control more than just public health, but also sort of the public reaction to the epidemic.